Hello, everybody, and welcome to the abode again. I'd like to thank you for joining me one more time, and welcome to another episode of Speech Class. This time we're doing a information speech, informative speech. I'd like to show you my audience. All right, so that's my audience. I'm going to hand my phone off to an audience member so I can start my speech. All right. Hello. What? What's going on? What is that? Oh no, do you see it? Oh man, those guys, they're taking that lady's purse. What am I gonna do? I think we should call the cops. Call the cops. By the time the cops will get here, her purse will be gone. Wait a minute. What's that? Do you see it? I do. It's a bird. It's a plane. No, it's Superman. Superman. I love Superman. It was that very his I think it was probably that very scenario in the very first Superman comic book that I ever read that probably captivated my attention and made me love comic books from that time on. The comic book, to me, took me to another place and another time. And as being a youth, I couldn't put it down. I remembered reading and reading and reading and wondering what was going to happen next. So when you think of comic books, what do you think about? Do you think about superheroes? Maybe you think about villains. You think about the good guys and you think about the bad guys. When I think about comic books, I think about other worlds and other dimensions. I think about the good guys, the superheroes, and even the supervillains, the ones that battle. I also think about fun and adventure. So, what is a comic book? A comic book, according to the encyclopedia, I'm going to read what it says. A comic book or comic book, also called comic magazine or simply comic, is a publication that consists of comics art in the form of subsequential panels that represent individual scenes. What is the intention of a comic book? The intention of a comic book is to captivate one's attention, to make you think that you're in another place and in another time. It's to provide a story. Now, with each comic book, there's different stories. The story doesn't have to be a true story. As a matter of fact, most of the comics are science fiction, so they're not true at all. And then there's comics that are true stories. They're taken out of Vietnam or whatnot. And so the baseline is true and correct, but yet they'll throw in a little bit more just so you know what's going on. Some of the comic books are just one book or one magazine. Some comic books are multiple, many, several books or several magazines that can go on for years and years. So, when was the first comic book created? The first comic was created in 1827, and the comic book was called a graphic novel or comic book. It was by Rudolph Topher. He created several novels or several comics that were extremely successful and reprinted in different languages, and several of them had English versions in America. The books remained in print in America until 1877. I'd like to share one comic book character with you that I really like and I've always enjoyed, and that is the Punisher. The Punisher actually came into play in The Amazing Spider Man in issue 129 in 1974. He was brought into that comic book as a character, and Spider Man had to battle against him. The Punisher didn't have his own comic book, though, until 1986. He isn't really a hero, and he's not a villain. He was actually what you would call a vigilante. He didn't fight against justice, he didn't fight for justice. But he actually fought for what he thought was right. So in conclusion, I'd like to invite you into the world of comic books and go on an adventure. Make sure that when you start your journey, to have an open mind and be prepared for anything. I must warn you, that you might become impatient, wondering what's going to happen next. But before we depart, I'd like to share a few unique comic books with you. The first one is called Justice Machine. Justice Machine. He was actually a character very similar to Punisher. He wasn't with the law, he wasn't against the law, but he did what he thought was right and round. And then there's also something called Mr. Miracle. Mr. Miracle was a superhero, but in his super acts, he ended up creating miracles that would help people out. And then the last one that I'd like to share with you that I think is a great comic is called Vietnam Journal. And if you pay attention, these are not around anymore, but if you pay attention in every episode or every issue of the Vietnam Journal, they've always got someone that was became MIA or missing in action during the Vietnam War. And such as this one, it was Major Laurent, Laurent Lee Gurley. And so it would tell you one person on each of the comic books who was missing in action. And so they wanted the public to be aware and to be able to fight for the people that they fought during the Vietnam War. So let me go and be in conclusion and say the next time you hear the saying, is it a bird? Is it a plane? No, it's Superman. Don't just think, oh, I know that saying. But instead, after reading a few comics, maybe you can actually visualize it and then you'll be able to see it in your mind as well. So I'd like to thank you for joining me. And until next time, talk to you later.